In the scorched heart of the Arizona Territory, where the sun bled red into the canyons and the wind whispered secrets of ancient spirits, 12 Apache warriors circled each other like wolves in the fading light of a tribal fire. Their bodies, painted with ochre and ash, gleamed with sweat and resolve, muscles rippling under the flicker of flames that danced as high as a man's hope. This was no ordinary clash. It was the rite of the Swift Eagle, a sacred tournament where the strongest would claim the hand of Aiyana, the daughter of Chief Nanton, whose beauty was said to rival the wild roses that bloomed defiant against the desert stone. Drums thundered like the heartbeat of the earth, and the village elders watched from shadowed perches, their eyes sharp as flint. But amid the roar of the crowd and the clash of rawhide shields, one figure stood apart, a lone cowboy, his weathered Stetson pulled low, leaning against a mesquite tree as if the fate of hearts and honors meant nothing to him. His name was Elias Thorne, and in that moment, as the first spear flew and blood misted the air, no one could have guessed that Aiyana's choice would shatter traditions like brittle clay. Elias had ridden into the Apache lands 3 moons earlier, his horse lathered and his soul heavier than the dust on his boots. He was a man forged in the fires of the frontier, orphaned young in a Comanche raid, raised by a circuit-riding preacher who taught him the gospel alongside the quick draw of a colt. But the West had a way of twisting good intentions. Elias had seen too many towns burn, too many treaties broken like dry twigs under cavalry boots. He drifted now, not as a gunslinger, but as a quiet fixer of broken things, mending fences for ranchers too poor to pay, pulling calves from mudslides for widows who offered only a tin cup of coffee in return. Kindness, he called it, though in his heart, it was penance for the lives he couldn't save. When his horse threw a shoe near the edge of the Apache reservation, he sought water from a stream guarded by the tribe's watchful eyes. That's when he first saw Aiyana. She was hauling water in a woven basket, her long black hair braided with turquoise beads that caught the light like captured stars. Her eyes, deep as the night sky over the mesas, held a quiet fire, a blend of grace and unyielding spirit that made Elias pause, his hand stilling on the reins. He didn't speak at first. Words between worlds were often arrows that missed their mark. Instead, he knelt by the stream, his calloused fingers working the stone until the horse drank deep. Aiyana watched him, not with suspicion, but curiosity, as if sensing the invisible scars that mapped his skin like the arroyos scarred the land. "Stranger," she said finally, her voice steady as the river's flow, "the spirits do not favor those who take without giving." Elias met her gaze, a faint smile cracking his sun-chapped lips. "Ma'am, I've taken plenty in my time, but today, I'll give." He straightened, revealing a small pouch from his saddlebag, dried wildflowers and herbs his preacher father had sworn could soothe fevered brows. Her younger brother, Little Hawk, lay ill in the village, his body racked by the white man's sickness that crept in on trade winds. Elias had seen it before, in mining camps from Colorado to California. He pressed the pouch into her hand, showing her how to brew the tea, his voice low and patient, as if sharing a secret with the wind itself. That act was selfless, born not of desire but of the simple truth that suffering didn't care for borders or bloodlines. Aiyana took the herbs, her fingers brushing his in a moment that lingered like the scent of sage after rain. She didn't thank him in words. Apache pride ran deeper than that. But in the days that followed, as Little Hawk's fever broke and color returned to his cheeks, she watched Elias from afar. He lingered in the valley, trading labor for lodging, repairing the chief's corral with knots learned from Navajo traders, sharing stories around the fire that wove tales of far-off oceans and iron horses without a hint of superiority. The warriors noticed him, these proud sons of Geronimo's shadow, men like Tall Bear, whose spear arm could fell a coyote at 50 paces, and Swift Wind, whose laughter boomed like thunder but hit a heart scarred by lost battles. They tolerated the cowboy, calling him Ghost Rider for his pale skin and silent ways, but they marked him as an outsider, unworthy of the fire's warmth or Aiyana's glance. Word of the rite spread like wildfire through the canyons, drawing kin from distant bands. Chief Nanton, his face etched with the lines of too many winters and too few rains, announced it under a canopy of stars. The victor would wed Aiyana, binding families and ensuring the tribe's strength against the encroaching railroads and homestead claims. "The eagle chooses the swiftest wing," he intoned, his voice gravelly with ceremony. The 12 warriors, each a legend in his own right, prepared with rituals of sweat lodges and vision quests. They fasted, painted their bodies with symbols of thunderbirds and mountain lions, and sharpened their lances until they sang through the air. Aiyana, though, felt no thrill in the spectacle. Her heart, like the desert bloom, opened only to those who nurtured without demanding soil in return. She had seen the warriors' valor in hunts and skirmishes, their bravery a fierce poetry written in blood and dust. Yet bravery alone was a blade that cut both ways. It guarded the tribe but sometimes blinded the soul. Elias, with his quiet hands and eyes that saw pain without judgment, had touched something deeper, a thread of humanity that wove through all peoples, red man and white, like the roots of the cottonwood seeking water underground. As the day of the rite dawned, the village swelled with hundreds, elders in fringed buckskin, children wide-eyed on mothers' hips, distant cousins arrived on ponies striped with sweat. The arena was a natural bowl ringed by red rock, its floor packed earth stained from contests past. Banners of feathers and trade cloth fluttered from poles, and the air hummed with chants that called the ancestors to witness. Elias found a perch on a boulder overlooking the fray, his hat-brim shading eyes that had witnessed worse violence in saloon brawls and border wars. He wasn't there for Gloria the girl's hand. He'd come at Aiyana's subtle invitation, a woven bracelet slipped into his palm the night before. "Watch, Ghost Rider," she'd whispered, "and see the true measure of a man." The warriors entered as the sun crested the eastern rim, their war cries splitting the sky. First came the tests of strength, hurling boulders the size of bare hides, wrestling grapples that left skin torn and spirits unbroken. Tall Bear prevailed in the stone throw, his massive frame heaving the rock skyward like a defiant prayer. Then the footrace across burning sands, where Swift Wind's legs blurred into wind itself, outpacing the field with a whoop that echoed off the cliffs. But it was the final trial, the circle of spears, that tested not just body but soul. The 12 formed a ring, each armed with a blunt-tipped lance and a hide shield painted with personal totems. The rules were ancient: strike to disable, not kill, but hold nothing back, for the spirits favored the unrelenting. Drums quickened, and the clash erupted, a whirlwind of grunts, thuds, and flying dust. Shields cracked like thunder, lances glancing off ribs and thighs, drawing welts that would scar like badges of honor. One by one, warriors fell. A young brave named Red Fox crumpled from a blow to the knee, his face twisted not in defeat but quiet acceptance. 5 remained, then 3, Tall Bear, Swift Wind, and Iron Claw, a veteran whose scars told tales of raids against Mexican bandits. The crowd's cheers swelled, a living tide that pulled at the heartstrings of every soul gathered. Aiyana stood beside her father on the raised platform, her deerskin dress embroidered with quills that shimmered like her resolve. She watched, her face a mask of serenity, but inside, doubt coiled like a rattlesnake. These men were her brothers in blood and battle, guardians of the old ways. To choose among them was to honor the tribe, to look beyond was to risk the fragile peace with the white world pressing in. Elias watched too, his fingers absently tracing the bracelet on his wrist, a simple twist of yucca fiber, warm as her touch. He admired the warriors' fire, their unyielding bond to land and kin, a loyalty he'd chased in saloons and stampedes but never quite grasped. Yet as the fight wore on, he saw the undercurrents, the flicker of envy in a glance, the subtle trip of a foot that spoke of old grudges. In the heat of it, Iron Claw lunged at Swiftwind not with honor, but with a hidden knife edge on his lance, forbidden by the elders' code. The blow glanced true, slicing deep into Swiftwind's shoulder, blood blooming dark against his skin. A gasp rippled through the crowd, but before the elders could call foul, Swiftwind staggered, his eyes locking not on his foe, but on the platform, on Aiyana. He straightened, refusing aid, and struck back with a shield bash that sent Iron Claw sprawling. The crowd roared approval, but Elias saw the pain etched deeper than flesh, the erosion of trust, the way valor could curdle into something sharper, more desperate. That's when the unexpected shattered the circle like a stone through still water. From the shadows of the canyon rim, a cry pierced the din, not Apache, but raw, human anguish. Little Hawk, Aiyana's brother, had slipped away from the healer's tent, his frail body drawn by the drums despite his lingering weakness. He teetered on a precarious ledge, drawn too close by boyish awe, his small hand reaching for a loose rock that crumbled under his weight. Time slowed. The boy plummeted, a feather in freefall, toward the jagged floor below. The warriors froze, lances mid-swing, their world narrowing to that tiny, falling form. Aiyana's scream tore from her throat, a sound that stripped the air bare. Chief Nanton surged forward, but age and distance held him back. The crowd held its breath, the drums falling silent as if the spirits themselves recoiled. Elias didn't think, he never did in moments like these. Kindness was a reflex, selflessness the only map he trusted. He vaulted from his boulder, boots pounding the earth in a boor, his body cutting through the stunned arena like a knife through silk. Warriors carted instinctively, their eyes widening at the mad white man charging the cliff. He reached the base as Little Hawk hit the halfway mark, arms flailing, a keening wail echoing off the rocks. Elias leapt, fingers snagging a jutting root he'd spotted earlier while mending fences, a precarious hold, but enough. He swung out, his free hand outstretched, muscles burning from disuse and the weight of years. "Boy," he bellowed, voice cracking with urgency. Little Hawk twisted midair, his eyes meeting Elias's in that suspended heartbeat. Trust, pure, childlike, flashed there, and the boy flung himself forward. Elias caught him, the impact wrenching his shoulder like fire, but he held, wrapping the child against his chest as they dangled, feet kicking over the void. The arena erupted, not in cheers, but a collective exhale, a wave of awe that rippled from the platform to the farthest spectator. Elias climbed, inch by agonizing inch, his boots scraping for purchase, grunts escaping through gritted teeth. Below, the warriors dropped their weapons, forgotten in the dust, and rushed to the base. Tall Bear and Swift Wind reached up first, their strong hands clasping Elias's boots, pulling with the same ferocity they'd unleashed moments before. Iron Claw, bloodied and humbled, joined them, forming a human chain that hoisted man and boy to safety. Little Hawk clung to Elias, sobbing into his shirt, while Aiyana broke from the platform, weaving through the crowd like a spirit unbound. She reached them as Elias collapsed to his knees, dust-caked and gasping, his hat lost to the wind. You flew like the eagle," she whispered, kneeling beside him, her hands framing his face, gentle, reverent. In that profound realization, the arena transformed. The warriors gathered close, not as victors or vanquished, but as witnesses to something rarer than gold in the streams, the power of one man's unasked for grace to bridge chasms wider than canyons. Chief Nanton stepped forward, his eyes, once stern as storm clouds, softening with the dawn's first light. "The rite is ended," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of ancestors. "Strength is not in the spear, but in the hand that catches the falling star." The 12 warriors knelt then, not in defeat, but unity, their heads bowed to the cowboy who had risked all for one small life. Elias, oblivious to the honor, ruffled Little Hawk's hair, murmuring, "Ain't nothing, son." Just what neighbors do. The emotional climax crested as Aiyana rose, the crowd falling silent once more. Tradition demanded she point to her champion, the one whose prowess would weave her fate into the tribe's tapestry. All eyes turned to her, the warriors rising with quiet dignity, their faces alight with the glow of shared salvation. She scanned them, her kin, her protectors, gratitude swelling in her chest like a river after rain. Then, slowly, deliberately, her arm extended, her finger tracing the air until it settled on the figure still kneeling in the dust. Elias Thorne, the lone cowboy, alone no more. Gasps rippled outward, but they were laced with wonder, not outrage. For in that pointing, Aiyana didn't reject the old ways, she expanded them, declaring that true worth lay not in blood or battle, but in the quiet acts that mended the world's hidden fractures. Elias looked up, bewildered, his blue eyes meeting her dark ones, and in that gaze, two worlds collided, not in conquest, but in quiet alliance. The village celebrated that night under a blanket of stars that seemed brighter, closer, as if the heavens themselves approved. Feasts of roasted mescal and venison steamed in the firelight, songs weaving tales of the ghost rider who tamed the fall. The warriors, once rivals, became brothers anew, toasting Elias with mescal that burned like liquid courage. Tall Bear clapped his back, booming, "You fight with heart, white brother, not lance." Swift Wind, his shoulder bandaged but spirit unbroken, shared a pipe, the smoke curling like unspoken forgiveness. Even Iron Claw approached, head low, offering a carved wolf totem as amends. The knife was fear's shadow. "You showed us light." Elias accepted it humbly, his voice rough with emotion he rarely voiced. "Fear's got no color, friends. It creeps in on all of us. But reaching out, that's the real fight." Aiyana sat beside him through the revelry, her hand finding his under the woven blanket, a silent promise in the warmth of her touch. She spoke of her vision quests, of dreams where rivers of all colors flowed into one great sea, and how his herbs had been more than medicine. They were a bridge, a reminder that humanity's power lay in its shared vulnerabilities. Elias, for the first time in years, felt the weight of his wandering lift, replaced by roots sinking deep into willing soil. He told her of his preacher father, who preached that the least of these were the greatest in the eyes of the divine, and how the West had tested that truth until it shone like silver. In her, he saw not just a woman, but a mirror to his own unspoken hopes, a life where kindness wasn't a solitary spark, but a communal flame. As the fires banked low and the village drifted into dreams, Elias and Aiyana walked the canyon's edge, the night's chill nipping at their heels. "Why me?" he asked, his voice a whisper against the wind. She turned to him, her smile a crescent moon. "Because you chose to give when the world taught you to take. In a land of warriors, you were the gentlest storm." He pulled her close, their foreheads touching, and in that embrace, the barriers of tongue and tribe dissolved, leaving only the universal rhythm of two hearts beating as one. In the years that followed, the story of the 12 warriors and the cowboy who caught the star became legend, retold around campfires from the Rio Grande to the Sierra Madres. Elias and Aiyana built a home at the valley's heart, adobe with a corral for his horses and a garden for her herbs, where Apache and settler children played without fear, learning songs in 2 languages. The tribe grew stronger, not through conquest, but alliances forged in mutual aid. Elias teaching irrigation tricks from California valleys, the warriors sharing tracking wisdom that saved lost homesteaders in blizzards. Little Hawk grew tall and fierce, but with a healer's hands, crediting the Ghost Rider for his second chance. And so, in the vast tapestry of the American soul, woven with threads of struggle and triumph, the tale endures as a beacon, that in our deepest divides, an act of selfless compassion can rewrite destinies, turning strangers into family and lone wanderers into legends. It reminds us that true strength isn't in the hand that wields the spear, but in the one that reaches across the void. For in kindness, we find not just survival, but the soaring freedom of the eagle's wing, unbound, unbreakable, and forever hopeful.